Hello, listeners. If you've enjoyed these narrations, please click on that like and subscribe button. I found a strange message in a bottle. It was such a simple, unremarkable scenario. I was sitting alone on the beach, drinking a gin and tonic mixture out of a Sprite bottle. Look, don't judge me, okay? It's what I like to do after work on Wednesdays. This was my idea of fun, apparently. Call it a midweek escape. Like I've stated, it was just an ordinary day. So ordinary and uneventful, in fact, that I ended up dozing off on the spot. When I woke up, the sun was already setting. A lot of people don't know this, but the sun actually goes down relatively early in LA. A little after 8 p.m. to be exact. I looked at my phone, which had miraculously not been stolen at this point. It read 8:05. It was late, but not time to head home just yet. This place was rather calming at night, and the overwhelming crowd noise was replaced by the distant city din, and the moonlight begins reflecting off the water. It really does feel somewhat serene. 9 p.m. I'd leave at 9. At around 8:50, I decided to get up and start walking across the shoreline. The cool water brushing over your feet was a good feeling to have on that hot sand for hours. As I was walking, I noticed something shiny just ahead of me. When I got over there, it became apparent that it was just a label of a glass bottle reflecting the moonlight. People throw trash in the ocean always pisses me off. I moved over there and fished it out, planning on throwing it out where it actually belonged. But it wasn't obvious that this wasn't just somebody's empty soda bottle. There was a rolled up piece of paper stuffed inside. In addition to that, it seemed to be wrapped in a reflective tape. That's why I actually saw it so easily. A message in a bottle, I thought. Cute. Since it was dark outside, I decided to take it under a street light before reading it. I mean, it was probably just a messy rambling of elementary-age kid, or something along those lines. At any rate, I suppose that I thought it must be interesting enough to take a look at before just tossing it. But what I read put me into a state of absolute incredulent. This is what was written onto that paper. They were coordinates, a date and a time. But I suppose that scared me the most was actually the message messily scrawled near the bottom. The man in black will be there. But please, don't go. There was nothing on the ship. There was nothing. Of course, this was all extremely hard to decipher. It looked as if the person who wrote it was rushing pretty fast. May 26th, 4 a.m. was the date written. That was today. Well, tomorrow actually, I suppose. I simply stared at the paper for the longest time, trying to make some kind of determination regarding what the hell this was supposed to be. But what was I supposed to think about this? A part of me wanted to simply forget about it. I mean, why should I care about some obscure message I found floating around the bottle in the ocean? But there was another part of me. That part that leads people into making bad decisions. We don't always fear the unknown. Sometimes we're just curious about it. That's why I didn't stop right there. I called up one of my buddies, Cillian, who I knew would be interested, and told him all about it. At first he tried to accuse me of writing the message myself in an attempt to trick him into this. That's the stupidest shit I've heard in my life, I remember telling him. Eventually he relented. I guess he realized that his accusations were absurd. At around 3:30 a.m., we began heading over to the address. It wasn't necessarily in a bad part of town. It was just in a relatively deserted part. The address seemed to correspond to a small, abandoned strip mall that looked ready to be completely torn down. We parked all the way down the street, using nearby woods as cover as we made our way towards it. Eventually, we found ourselves directly across from the place, peeking at it through thick bushes. In retrospect, this all should have seemed so childish. I mean, we were like kids spying on something restricted to us. However, we never questioned it at the time. The whole situation began to feel weird. The sensation of wrongness and ambiguous terror began mounting every second. I could tell that Cillian was feeling the same way, but none of us ever said anything, so we just waited to see what would happen. To our moderate surprise, a car pulled up to the other side of the street at exactly 4 a.m. We watched as what we assumed to be a man hopped out. Now, it was dark, so we couldn't really make out the intricacies of his outfit, but he probably in some kind of dark suit. What's even weirder was his face seemed, obscure somehow. What I mean is that the moonlight should have illuminated at least some of his features. At one point, he even glanced in our direction. Not directly at us, but for a brief moment. He looked in our direction. But his face simply seemed to comprise of nothingness. At the time, we were just chalking it up to the night. We simply couldn't see his face because it was so dark outside. I mean, that made sense, right? However, the man stopped moving right after that. And I mean, he stopped. He was just standing, deathly still by his vehicle. This went on for what felt like an hour, but in reality, it was only about 25 minutes. But still, who the fuck gets out of their car at 4 a.m. and stands still for 25 straight minutes? Even weirder was the fact that he didn't seem to be breathing. I mean, you could stand still to the best of your ability, but you could never completely be motionless, you know? Your chest would have to puff out intermediately, even slightly, from inevitable exhalation. But he wasn't doing that. It was as if he was staring at a cardboard cutout. At some point it became less creepy and more disconcerting. Now I've heard about someone passing out while standing up, but I suppose that strange things have happened. Cillian says that we should go and see if the guy's okay. I call him a madman, and after a brief argument, we hear something that breaks the silence. Footsteps. The guy is walking towards one of the stores in the strip mall now. Upon realization of this, we simply stared after him in the sheer bewilderment. So what the hell is he just doing? Even after the man had disappeared into the building, we still waited there for a few minutes. We weren't ballsy enough to follow him inside, but we also weren't scared enough to leave yet. We were at some kind of middle ground of terrified and curious. But after about 10 minutes, we realized that we had no idea whether this guy was actually doing in there. This meant that waiting for him to come out could be an overnight process. But I was getting tired. Work the next morning didn't start until noon for me, but I still needed to get some kind of rest. We were about to leave when a blood-curdling female scream nearly made my heart explode. It was coming from the building. We were in shock for the first few seconds, so we didn't immediately take action. It was the subsequent scream that jolted us back into reality when we decided to call 911. "But what the hell are we gonna tell them?" Cillian asked me. "Hell if I know, but we gotta do something, right?" I responded. "We make the call and the operator tells us that somebody will be over there within the next 20 minutes, but the situation's starting to seem more and more urgent." "Please, help me now, somebody." Somebody called out now, and it sounded like they were in pain. "Fuck it," I heard Cillian mutter under his breath as he pulled out a pistol from his waistband. "Come on, cops are slow, man." "Yeah, well, I don't have a gun, asshole." "Fine, then just stay here." Before I could stop him, he gets up and starts bolting towards the mall. I realized that I need to make a decision within the next split second, so I ran after him. Although he was an impulsive idiot, I didn't want to see him wind up dead. Besides, I was pretty sure that he had no idea how to shoot that thing. I caught up to him just as he was stepping his foot through the front door entrance. The screaming and pleading was still going on, so we kept going deeper into the hallway. However, we had no idea where we were actually going. Wait, why couldn't we figure out where to go? The answer soon became pretty obvious. The screaming had maintained the same volume ever since we entered. We couldn't tell where it was coming from. Hell, I'm inclined to believe that the screaming was still as loud as when we were outside near the forest. I think Cillian realized this at the same time I did. He dropped his gun for a second and I could hear him breathing, tightening. It was at that exact moment when the screaming ceased altogether. Instead, it was replaced by a steady, rhythmic set of footsteps. But just like the screaming, we couldn't tell where they were coming from. Trying to create a better sense of direction in this suddenly claustrophobic space, I fumbled around in my pocket for my phone. Eventually I got it out and turned the flashlight on. But there was nobody in our perceptible vicinity, although I could still hear the footsteps. I mean, it sounded like they were coming from everywhere, and at some point I managed to illuminate what appeared to be a message carved into the wall. "Why are you following me?" And then suddenly, we could see him. What I can only assume was the man in black. He was wearing a suit, black blazer, black shirt, black pants, and black shoes, but I still couldn't see his face. Not in the sense that he was wearing a mask, though. In place of where his face should have been, there was nothing. I mean, I could see his ears and dark, silken back hair, but his features were absent, covered by some kind of endless, empty space. It's hard to accurately describe, but that's the closest depiction that I could have come to. I could hear gunshots from behind me. Cillian was shooting at him, but the bullets seemed to just be consumed by the void taking up the man's head. That's when the man in black lunged forward, but I managed to get out the way just in time. And the problem is, Cillian. He was standing right behind me. With seamlessly inhuman strength, the man hoisted and grabbed him down the hallway. I went after them, of course, but it seemed as if the two had quickly vanished into thin air. No more screaming, no more sounds of struggle, and no more footsteps. I was left standing there, petrified to the core. It wasn't long after that until the police showed up, and I told them what I saw. I have a feeling that they didn't believe me, though. I was questioned extensively, but that yielded minimal closure. They searched the entire place, but didn't find his body. They didn't find any bodies, in fact. That's when they decided to declare Cillian missing. They tried to stick me with something, but ultimately couldn't. I mean, I didn't do it after all. The fucking man in black did. However, they found him about 3 weeks later. Cillian, I mean. He was in the forest, clothes tattered and eyes bloodshot. They could barely get a coherent story out of him. He simply kept saying that the man in black took him somewhere terrible. That he could wake up in the woods every night, and that a strange woman would keep beckoning for him to come inside to her cabin. He tried running away from her, but the man in black would always be in his way. In short, he'd gone insane. He won't even talk to me when I'd go and see him. His crazed ramblings cease when I'm in the room, though, and he refuses to make eye contact. I'm writing this because the man in black is still after me. I came home one night to see my bathtub full. I only ever shower. I haven't used it in years. And there, in the water floating on top of it, was that damn bottle with the message in it. But this time it contained only a singular phrase. "You follow me, and I'll follow you."